There's no bad time for Victoria sponge. Afternoon tea time, nothing better really. Hi, my name's Helen and I'm a chef here at the Waitrose and Partners Cookery School. Today I'm showing you how to make a Victoria sponge. This is a really special recipe to me because this is the first thing that I learned to bake independently. I think if you've only got one thing in your repertoire, it should be this. If you want the full recipe, the link is in the description. I'm going to line this with a little bit of butter and flour and then also some parchment in the base just so that it comes out nice and easily. So you want a piece of parchment cut to the size of your tin. You can use a little bit of leftover butter paper for this. It's got perfect amount of grease on it and it will mean that you get a really nice even covering. And then you just want a little bit of flour and you can sprinkle it all the way around on the inside, and then you're going to go around and literally tap it so that that flour evenly coats all the butter that you've got on the inside, and then your base can go in and baking parchment goes on top of that. And just use the exact same method for the next tin as well. So I've got 225 grams of self-raising flour. I'm also going to add a pinch of salt and then I can sieve that into a bowl so it's ready to go later on. So we're going to start by cracking our eggs into a bowl. We need 4 large eggs. You want to have room temperature eggs. So into that we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. It's going to give us a lovely rounded flavour, and it really does go quite a long way. And then we're just going to whisk this all up together. So now we're ready to start creaming together the butter and sugar. So we've got 225 grams each of golden caster sugar and unsalted butter, which is at room temperature. So we're going to mix it until it's just combined, and then we'll increase the speed and mix it for at least 8 minutes, maybe even 10, until it's really nice and pale and creamy. And this step is so important because we want to create a lot of air in the mixture. So you can see the mixture is much lighter in colour, it's almost doubled in volume, and it's really, really fluffy, almost like a mousse. It's time to add in our eggs. So we're going to pour these into the mixture really slowly, but with the mixer running on a high speed. So I'm going to get it off the mixer now and do the final bit of mixing by hand. I'm going to add in my flour and salt, which has been sieved together. So I'm going to tip that all in one go, and then I'm going to fold it through. And I'm using a kind of cutting motion, so I'm going to go in the figure of 8 around the edge of the bowl and then cutting through the centre. And the aim is to get it combined in as few movements as possible. So we want it to be a nice dropping consistency, which just means it's going to fall easily from the spoon when it's tapped. So I'm going to take a spoonful just to check. And that was a little bit reluctant for me, so I'm going to add in a little bit of milk and then we'll fold that through briskly. You can add more if you need to, so I'll give it another check. And you see that time, it just falls really easily from the spoon. Time to get this divided up between our prepared tins. And I always, when I'm making a cake, I always go straight into the center of the tin and then spread to the outsides. So if you make a slight dip here, you end up with a nice flat sponge, which is perfect for stacking. I think it's definitely better to bake 2 separate sponges and stack them together than it is to do one big cake. I think if you're making a big cake, it's okay if you've got something in there that's going to create loads of moisture as it bakes, so something that's got lots of oil in it or maybe some ground nuts, but this one will dry out really easily, so a quick bake is really great to keep it nice and moist. So I'm going to bake these on the same shelf in the middle of the oven for about 18 to 22 minutes. But you do want to check in on them after the first 15 minutes and not before. If we open the door too soon, we run the risk of the cakes sinking in the center because they haven't fully set yet. So now it's time to make our buttercream. So we've got some lovely soft butter, 125 grams in the bowl, and we're going to beat it until it's nice and smooth. We can then add in the icing sugar. I would recommend either mixing it by hand first or starting off really slowly when you get the icing sugar in there, because it can erupt and fill the air a little bit. Then you can crank the speed up so that it's nice and smooth. So once that's nice and light and fluffy, you can add in your vanilla paste. So we're going to add a ½ teaspoon here, just for a light kind of vanilla accent. And then we're just going to beat it together really quickly to mix that vanilla through. So the classic filling for a Victoria sponge would typically be cream, but buttercream is just going to take it up a notch in terms of decadence. If you wanted it to be a cream filling, you could use whipping cream or double cream, and you just need to whip it until it's at kind of stiff peaks, because you are relying on it to hold those 2 sponges in place. So my 2 cakes have cooled, they're ready to be assembled now. So I'm going to start by putting one on the base, and we're going to flip them so that they're top to top. So the flat side goes on the bottom, and then onto that we can pile all of our lovely buttercream. So I just tend to rotate the cake stand as I go, so I can push it evenly to the edges. So I'm using raspberry jam today. You could use raspberry or strawberry for a traditional Victoria sponge, but you could even mix it up and do something with apricot jam, plum, maybe even cherry. You could also use lemon curd. That would be a really nice pairing with the buttercream. And if you wanted to, you could use fresh fruit too. But I prefer using jam because I feel that it holds the sponges together really nicely and keeps them moist. Now it's time to put the final sponge on top. This one's gonna stay upside down, so we've got a nice flat top. And then press it gently into place just to make sure that everything is held together nicely. For the finishing touches, I'm going to sprinkle over some icing sugar. I can't wait any longer to have a slice. It's so good. Yeah, that's not my first Victoria sponge. Definitely a recipe I'm going to make again and again. It is best eaten on the day that you make it so that it's nice and fresh. I highly doubt that it would last longer than that anyway. This is my Victoria sponge. It's so simple and so delicious. You definitely owe it to yourself to give it a try.